The silent burden of the Nigerian first son. This video explores the deep-rooted dilemma and heavy responsibilities carried by the Nigerian first son. It examines how identity is assigned by birth, how leadership is imposed rather than chosen, and how silence becomes a learned form of strength. Through culture, tradition, and modern realities, the video reveals the emotional, social, and moral weight placed on the first son, often without support, while calling attention to the need for balance, understanding, and shared responsibility in today's Nigerian families. These are 6 unique features of the dilemma of the first son. 1. Identity formed before choice. Can identity be a choice when duty comes first? In many Nigerian families, identity is not discovered, it is assigned. For the first son, this assignment begins early and is rarely questioned. He assumes the leadership role even before he understands himself. He is told who he is expected to become, what he must represent, and what he must protect. His name, behavior, and future are subtly shaped by the knowledge that he is the first son. African philosophy places identity within the community rather than within the individual alone. A man is known by his lineage, his family, and his contribution to collective survival. The first son therefore grows up carrying an identity that is larger than his personal desires. His dilemma begins here. He must negotiate between who he is inwardly and who he is required to be outwardly. 2. Communal philosophy and the meaning of burden. Does African communal philosophy demand shared responsibility or silent sacrifice? African thought does not treat burden as punishment. It treats it as responsibility. And to belong is to carry something for others. In this sense, the burden of the first son is rooted in communal philosophy. He carries weight because he belongs deeply. The first son is rarely allowed a fully private life. His decisions are community matters. His success is shared joy, and his failure is shared shame. He becomes a vessel through which collective hope flows. However, African philosophy also teaches reciprocity. Burden is meant to be shared, not concentrated. When communal expectations rest heavily on one individual without community support, philosophy turns into oppression. The dilemma of the first son emerges when the community remembers what it must receive but forgets what it must give. 3. Leadership without consent. What happens when leadership is imposed before a man is ready to lead? Leadership in African tradition is not self-appointed, it is conferred. The first son becomes a leader by position, not by preference. He is expected to guide younger siblings, represent the family, settle disputes, and speak with authority even when he feels unprepared. African leadership philosophy defines leadership as service, patience, and sacrifice. The leader eats last and carries the heaviest load. The first son is therefore trained, often unconsciously, to accept discomfort as normal. He inherits family responsibility when his father dies, age notwithstanding. He learns early to accept insults from his siblings without reacting. His needs are postponed. His voice is moderated. His personal struggles are secondary to collective stability. He could easily be asked to abandon school to help at home while the younger sibling goes to school. This imposed leadership creates a quiet tension. Without mentorship, the first son may confuse leadership with control or silence. Without guidance, he may lead by fear or withdraw entirely. Yet, mistakes are rarely forgiven because leaders are expected to know better. If this resonates with you and you want to explore more stories of culture, family, and life lessons in Nigeria, especially as it relates to the boy child, hit the subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss an important insight. Join our community and be part of these conversations about identity, responsibility, and resilience of the boy child. Let me continue with the rest of the unique features of the dilemma of the first son. 4. The culture of silence and emotional inheritance. How does a first son cope when he inherits the pain no one talks about? Silence is one of the heaviest legacies handed to the Nigerian first son. He is taught early that strength means endurance without expression. Emotional pain is managed privately, if at all. Fear must be hidden. Confusion must be resolved alone. This silence is cultural, not accidental. African societies value composure and restraint, especially in men. The first son becomes the emotional shield of the family. During crisis, others are allowed to break. He must remain standing. But contemporary wisdom warns against this imbalance. Proverbs remind us that the drum that is beaten constantly will soon tear. When silence becomes a permanent requirement, emotional damage accumulates. Many first sons carry inherited silence, pain passed down from fathers who were also taught not to speak. 5. Legacy and the weight of ancestral expectation. What happens when a son carries the unfinished dreams of generations before him? In African philosophy, the dead are not gone. Ancestors remain part of the moral community. The first son often feels watched by both the living and the dead. He becomes the first through which ancestors are judged. Legacy therefore becomes heavy. The first son is expected to preserve family honor, correct historical mistakes, and achieve what previous generations could not. Failure is not personal, it is ancestral. This expectation can inspire discipline and purpose, but it can also produce fear. When legacy is framed only as obligation and never as guidance, the first son may feel trapped by a past he did not choose. 6. Tradition is a struggling economy. How does a first son reconcile duty with a world that is changing too fast? The modern Nigerian reality intensifies the dilemma. Economic instability, unemployment, and rising social pressure make traditional expectations increasingly difficult to meet. Yet, culture often remains unchanged in its demands. The first son is expected to provide financial support, fund education of siblings, resolve family crises, and maintain unity, even when he himself is economically vulnerable. This creates moral conflict. He is judged by standards formed in a different economic era. However, African philosophy is not rigid, it is adaptive. Elders teach that culture survives by adjustment. When the path disappears, wisdom creates a new one. The refusal to adopt expectations places the first son in constant guilt, regardless of effort. It is noteworthy that the burden carried by the Nigerian first son is deeply rooted in African communal philosophy. It is born from belonging, leadership, legacy, and love. Yet, when philosophy is applied without compassion, burden turns into quiet suffering. Contemporary wisdom demands balance. The first son should therefore be honored, supported, and heard. Only then can his role move from silent endurance to meaningful leadership. In the end, a community that protects its pillars protects itself. For the strength of the roof depends on all its pillars. Families must remember that strength is collective. As the proverb says, one hand cannot lift a calabash to the head. The first son should lead, but he should not be left alone to carry what belongs to many. If you believe in the well-being and success of the first son, like, follow, and share this video.